we have this crushed limestone rock. And when that's dissolved in water, it requires carbon dioxide to complete the chemical reaction. That carbon dioxide is largely already in rivers. Rivers typically are super saturated with carbon dioxide. There's a lot of it in the atmosphere, largely because we've put a lot in the atmosphere, but rivers naturally have an even higher concentration of CO2. And so there's a lot of CO2 there. The water, the CO2, and this limestone rock powder combined create a reaction. And it transforms that limestone rock powder into a larger molecule called bicarbonate. This bicarbonate is naturally occurring. It's really useful biologically, physiologically for many animals. But the most important part is it takes that CO2 and locks it in. It locks it into a large molecule that is widely useful for organisms. It helps the water actually regulate itself a little more so that if it encounters more acid, it can offset and balance that. And when it reaches the ocean is the real critical part. When it reaches the ocean, what it does is it adds to this natural ability of the ocean to fight against acidification. As we know, high concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere have acidified the ocean, and in some cases led to the loss of coral reefs, for example. That's because the ocean reserve of these base cations, so things that offset acid, that's been depleted, and what we do is deliver that base cation concentration back to the ocean to restore that natural balance. What we do know is that increasing concentration of CO2, and in some cases other acids that are in the atmosphere, largely because of the burning of fossil fuels, what that has done is increased the concentration of CO2 and other acids in rain, which has actually lowered the pH of many rivers. This acidification in fresh water fundamentally changes how CO2 is captured within rivers. And what we see is that in many rivers, particularly further up in the watershed, is that these rivers off-gas a lot of that natural CO2 that should be there. In an acidified river, a lot of that gas never makes its way to the ocean. Formerly, when the river was healthier and things were more in balance, that would have made its way to the ocean to continue that process. Instead, it's interrupted and shunted off to the atmosphere, speeds up the loop, but really not in our favor. The key is transforming carbon dioxide into bicarbonate, a stable molecule that won't leak back into the atmosphere. CO2 will go back into the atmosphere immediately and contributes to greenhouse gas warming issues and climate change, but this bicarbonate molecule actually enters the long-term process where we know that the median residence time in the ocean is actually 90,000 years. My co-founders and I, Shannon Sterling, professor at Dalhousie University, her and I have been working on freshwater restoration, myself for 20 years and her for over 25. It's where we come from, and we were studying the long-term impacts of pollution on rivers, trying to find some applied at-scale ways of solving the issues that we were seeing: species loss, loss of productivity, loss of biodiversity, both in rivers and in the ocean. And so that's the angle that we came at this from. We've been working with people in Scandinavia, here in Nova Scotia, environmental charity groups who have led the way on restoring rivers. And the process of adding alkalinity was first developed by people concerned about water quality and Atlantic salmon in particular. Never with a climate context, always with a species-specific context. So we're really fortunate. There's a huge body of literature, and these sort of processes are really well tested and trialed. So we have a lot of evidence, not just from us, but from other people who have looked at the impacts on river water quality, but also the base of the food chain, things like aquatic insects, moving on up through the food web, fish certainly, and even beyond fish, the broader ecosystem, the otters, the animals that require fish and good clean water. So there's a huge body of peer-reviewed literature out there showing that what we do is not only no harm, which is important for us, but actually hugely beneficial. The projects that I've been involved with here in Nova Scotia, where a lot of this thinking originated, we've seen a huge resurgence in the health of rivers, where rivers which were really on the brink with species loss and really low productivity were brought back to vibrant, healthy rivers that supported not only important fish populations, but the full community around them and the way that people interact with that river, carry on traditions of fishing and traditional harvest, and just have a better relationship. So restorative across the board. It's a natural process because it's really quite simple as dissolving the rock that should dissolve naturally and does dissolve and can be shown to be dissolving. We just speed that up because we've sped up the other side of this scale, this balance. Naturally, the emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere from things like volcanoes will be balanced off by the erosion of mountains. And we've just made that a lopsided equation in contemporary times. We're simply restoring that balance. The beauty is too on the downstream side where it goes into the ocean, this long-term storage in the ocean. Here in Eastern Canada, we see that people are struggling with cultivation of mussels and clams. We know that some animals are really struggling. In warmer climates, we see that there's bleaching of coral reefs. All of that is symptomatic of an imbalance in the acids and bases that are in the ocean. Humans have put too many acids. All this is restoring that natural process of supplying more bases. Simple as that.